If you push Jesus plus my obedience, you know who you are. Pay attention to this. Matthew 7:21-23 is not aimed at atheists or obvious rebels. It is aimed at religious people who think trusting Jesus plus their obedience will be enough. The shock of the passage is not that some people are excluded from the kingdom. The shock is who is doing the excluding. Jesus does not say, God will say to you on that day. He says, many will say to me on that day. Jesus places himself at the center of final judgment without hesitation. That is not the language of a moral teacher. That is the language of the judge of the world. And look closely at who he turns away. They call him Lord. They do ministry in his name. They prophesy, cast out demons, and do mighty works. These are not people who ignored obedience. These are people who trusted their obedience. Jesus does not deny that the works happened. He denies the relationship. I never knew you. Here's their fatal mistake. They think their religious activity will make up for their lawlessness. They assume Jesus plus their performance equals acceptance. They trust output instead of mercy. They rely on fruit instead of righteousness. That is why Jesus calls them workers of lawlessness. Not because they lacked activity, but because they lived independently of God while using God's name. This is why Jesus says the difference is doing the will of my Father. And the will of the Father is not try harder. It is trust the Son. To trust Christ completely means seeing your utter need for his righteousness alone. Not Jesus plus obedience, not Jesus plus ministry, not Jesus plus moral effort, just Jesus. Matthew places this warning right before chapters 8 and 9 on purpose. Jesus then proves he has authority over disease, over demons, over creation, over sin itself. Matthew is stacking the evidence so we cannot say Jesus is merely a good teacher. If he calms storms, cleanses lepers, commands demons, and forgives sins, then Matthew 7 is not arrogance. It is mercy. Because Jesus tells us now before that day that obedience does not save. Performance does not justify, and righteousness cannot be earned, only received.